Rain slicked the quiet cul-de-sac, glinting on the asphalt like shards of broken glass. I was kneeling by the base of my new fence, hammer in hand, trying to straighten the warped board that refused to cooperate. The rhythmic pounding of my neighbor's pool pump sounded normal at first, but tonight it felt wrong. Off. Like the hum of something hungry. Hey! What do you think you're doing? A sharp, high-pitched voice cut through the steady drizzle. I froze, hammer mid-air. Karen's face appeared over the top of the fence. Her eyes were narrowed, her lipstick smeared by the rain, giving her an almost frantic, bird-like quality. You know that fence is blocking my shortcut, right? I don't care whose backyard this is. You're ruining everything. I'm just fixing a board, I said, trying to sound casual, though my pulse was already climbing. It's my property line. That's all. She leaned closer, fists on her hips, the rain soaking through her thin cardigan. Property line? Don't give me that. You're just an obstacle, and I have places to go. Her voice wobbled slightly, part fury, part desperation. Before I could respond, the back gate slammed behind her. Her husband, Tom, stepped out of the shadows, holding a tray with 2 mugs of coffee. He smiled warmly, almost apologetically. Hey, don't mind Karen. She's passionate about her swims. He set the mugs down on the fence post. Looks like you've got your hands full here. Karen's glare didn't shift, but Tom's presence added a layer of confusion I wasn't ready for. It was too late to retreat, too early to understand. I straightened and wiped my hands on my jeans, my mind racing. Why did the husband seem grateful? That's my shortcut, Karen spat, stepping closer. You're making it impossible for me. I don't care about fences or lines or legal crap. I want it open. I felt a strange mix of fear and irritation. Suburban life had its dramas, but nothing like this. Nothing with someone staring at me like I was the villain in a horror film. Tom shrugged. Well, at least she's honest about it. He gave a small nod toward me, and there it was again, that faint gratitude that didn't make sense. Karen's face twisted, rage building. You two are conspiring, aren't you? Don't play nice with me. I know how this goes. I took a step back. Her tone had shifted from furious neighbor to something sharper, predatory. Something calculated. It made my skin crawl. I'm not conspiring, I said. I just don't want to knock over my own fence. Karen scoffed and turned, stalking back toward her side of the property. This isn't over. You'll regret this. She disappeared behind the corner of the house, the sound of her stilettos muffled by the rain. I exhaled slowly, trying to settle the sudden knot in my stomach. Tom lingered by the gate, his hand brushing the wood casually, eyes scanning the yard. I know she can be intense, he said softly. But, honestly? I think you did the right thing. That fence, it's safer. More privacy. And, well, I like the way it keeps things contained. Something in his tone made me uneasy. His compliment felt layered, almost like a warning or a hint, but I couldn't place it yet. Thanks. I guess? I said, still unsure if I was talking to an ally or someone else entirely. Tom nodded once, smiling faintly, then disappeared into the warm glow of their kitchen, leaving me alone with the pounding rain. I looked back at my fence, the warped board still crooked, but something had shifted. I couldn't shake the feeling that Karen's eyes weren't the only ones watching tonight. The storm outside mirrored the tension building inside me. Small things began to feel like threats, the whisper of wind through the hedges, a sudden clap of thunder, the reflection of headlights from a passing car. I began to notice oddities I hadn't seen before, footprints in the mud that weren't mine, a strange metallic glint near the fence post, and the sense that every shadow carried intent. I tried to shake it off, convincing myself that I was just overreacting. But then I saw it, a scrap of paper wedged under the fence, soaked through but still legible. Scribbled in frantic handwriting, "Stop. Or worse will come." My heart pounded. That was no accident, no miscommunication. Someone had intentionally left it there. I stepped back, hammer still in hand, scanning the yard. Every neighbor's light seemed to flicker in rhythm with my pulse. The world felt suddenly claustrophobic, as if the quiet cul-de-sac had transformed into a labyrinth of suspicion. The rational part of my brain screamed to leave, call the police, or at least close the door behind me. But something compelled me to stay, to understand why Karen had snapped, why Tom's reaction was so strange, and who else might be lurking in the shadows. I wiped the rain from my eyes and bent over the fence again, trying to secure the crooked board. Each nail I hammered seemed to echo louder than it should, marking the rhythm of an invisible tension. And then I heard it, the soft click of a lock turning somewhere behind me. I spun around. Empty yard. No Tom, no Karen. Just the rain and the sound of my own breathing. But the scrap of paper trembled on the fence post, as if holding a secret I wasn't ready to uncover. That night, I realized something crucial. What started as a petty fence dispute was already evolving into something far more dangerous. And the calm suburban facade hiding Karen's obsession was only the beginning. Morning came slow, gray, and wet, like the sky itself was hung over from the storm. I stared at my fence through the kitchen window, coffee growing cold in my hands. The scrap of paper from last night still burned in my memory. Stop. Or worse will come. Whoever had left it wasn't done. And Karen's warning didn't feel like the end of her temper, it felt like a beginning. I stepped outside, boots crunching against the damp mulch, and examined the board I'd hammered last night. The nails had held, but the ground beneath was soft, disturbed. Footprints, small, precise, circled the fence line. Whoever had been here had come prepared, almost ritualistic. The thought made my stomach churn. I decided to investigate. Not with the police yet, they'd laughed this off as a neighborhood spat, but myself. Cameras, photographs, patterns. That was my approach. Calm, meticulous, intelligent. I needed evidence before paranoia took over. First, I checked my security cameras. Only the feed from last night. Grainy, mostly rain, but there an indistinct shadow lingering near the fence around 11:32 p.m. Slight movement. Then the figure vanished. Not Karen. Too tall. Too deliberate. I replayed it, frame by frame. The shadow paused, crouched briefly, and I caught a glint. Metal? A tool? It moved toward the fence's base, then retreated into darkness. Whoever it was, they were careful, calculating, aware. My hands trembled slightly. I tried to remind myself, keep calm. Observe. Gather evidence. By mid-morning, Karen appeared at her side of the fence. She looked almost innocent. Blonde hair damp, smile polite but brittle. Morning, she said. I hope I didn't wake you last night. I narrowed my eyes. You didn't, I said. But someone left me a message. You know anything about that? Karen tilted her head, pretending confusion. Message? Her voice was sugary, but there was steel underneath. I don't know what you mean. I studied her. Every gesture, every blink. Lies weren't obvious, they were subtle, layered. And Karen had layers. Too calm now. Too controlled. I'll keep an eye on things, I said cautiously. For everyone's safety. She smiled. Thin. I'd appreciate that. The encounter didn't settle anything. If anything, it tightened the coil around my chest. I needed more data. My next stop, the neighborhood registry and HOA records. Fences, property lines, complaints. Patterns emerge where you least expect them. What I found was curious. Karen had an almost obsessive history of community safety complaints. Minor things, mostly harmless, but consistent. And strangely, Tom's records mention nothing, no complaints, no incidents, just polite HOA meetings and volunteer work. The contrast was jarring. Karen, chaos in heels. Tom, calm, almost complicit. Or protective. Or something else. Later, I walked the perimeter of the fence again, notebook in hand. Each angle, each shadowed corner, each anomaly documented. And then I noticed it, a small, almost imperceptible mark on the wooden post. A scratch, deliberate, almost a symbol. Like a signature, or a warning. The sense of being watched grew heavier. Every breeze through the trees sounded like footsteps. Every rustle of leaves became a whisper. I couldn't tell if it was paranoia or reality, but I trusted my instincts. That night, I heard movement in the yard again. Not Karen. Not Tom. Something else. Quiet, precise, circling the fence line. I grabbed my flashlight and camera, heart hammering, and stepped into the dark. A figure froze when it saw me, barely illuminated by the beam. A man, or maybe a woman, was crouched low, adjusting something at the fence's base. I raised the camera and snapped a photo. They bolted. Fast, silent, leaving no trace but muddy footprints and a small metallic object I hadn't noticed before. I picked it up, a key, strangely ornate, with initials engraved, KT. My mind raced. Karen? Tom? Both? Or someone else entirely? The key was a puzzle piece that didn't fit neatly anywhere. The following days were a blur of quiet observation. I installed motion sensors, cameras, even set small traps, nothing confrontational, just monitoring. And the data began to tell a story. Someone was mapping my property. Someone was testing boundaries. And it wasn't random. Karen began showing up more often, always with the same brittle smile. I just want peace, she'd say, hands folded, like a saint in a suburban church. But every word dripped tension, a latent threat disguised as civility. Then, an unexpected breakthrough. Tom came over, alone this time. He brought a folded note. I think you need this, he said quietly, avoiding eye contact. The note was typed, crisp. Karen isn't acting alone. Watch for shadows. Trust no one fully. There's more at stake than offense. My stomach dropped. The husband, previously warm and oddly approving, was now warning me. Or manipulating me. Or both. I spent the night reviewing everything, the photos, the key, the note, Karen's behavior, Tom's sudden warning. The pattern was clear, this wasn't a petty HOA feud. It was a quiet, methodical siege. Someone was orchestrating events from the shadows, using Karen as the visible agent, Tom as the silent enabler, and me, the only barrier. By dawn, the tension had become almost physical. My walls felt like they had ears. Every knock on the door, every passing car, every whisper of wind sounded like an advance in a silent war. And the fence that had started all of this, had become more than a boundary. It was a line in the sand. A warning. A stage for a confrontation I couldn't yet see but could already feel building. I realized I was being drawn into something far larger, far darker than a neighborly spat. And Karen, or whoever truly pulled the strings, was already planning the next move. I didn't know when it would strike, but I knew it would. And I had to be ready. The neighborhood block party was in full swing, deceptively cheerful. String lights crisscrossed the cul-de-sac, and the smell of grilled burgers mingled with laughter. Children ran around, oblivious to the storm brewing beneath the veneer of suburban normalcy. And I walked in, trying to blend in, heart pounding like a drum. Tonight, everything would come to a head. Karen was already there, in a sundress that clung despite the humid evening air, chatting with neighbors, smiling that brittle, calculated smile. Tom hovered nearby, plate of food in hand, casual, unremarkable, but I knew better. I approached, nodding politely. Evening, Karen. Tom. Karen's eyes flicked to me for just a second, a tiny flash of recognition, maybe fear, maybe anger, before the mask returned. Good to see you here, she said, voice syrupy. Neighborhood coming together, right? I kept my tone even. It's nice to see people enjoying themselves. The first move in the chess game had to be subtle. I pulled out my camera discreetly, reviewing photos of last week's intrusions while pretending to scroll through my phone. Karen noticed. She tilted her head, a faint crease forming between her brows. Small, almost imperceptible, but it told me she was aware I wasn't naive. Then, the moment came. Karen's hand brushed the fence line near the gate I'd been guarding like a hawk. Something slipped from her grip. I caught it instinctively, a small envelope. White, thick, embossed. No stamp, no return address. I opened it under the table. Inside, photos. Close-ups of my fence, my property, even my back door. Each shot meticulously taken, timed, labeled. And at the bottom, in neat block letters, "You can't hide." Karen had been watching me all along. And now, she'd escalated. I looked up casually, handing the envelope to Tom. "Care to explain this?" My voice was calm, but sharp enough to cut through the chatter around us. Tom's face didn't change, but there was a flicker in his eyes. A pause. He glanced at Karen. "It's complicated," he said softly. "She's worried about property standards. Neighborhood safety." I laughed, low and bitter. "Safety? That's what this is? Threats? Photos? Surveillance?" Karen's mask finally cracked. Her voice sharpened. "You think this is a game? You block me, you interfere, and suddenly I'm the villain? I'm protecting what's mine. What's rightfully mine? Rightfully yours?" I pressed, taking a step closer. The crowd's attention didn't notice, still caught in their bubble of music and chatter. "Your shortcut? Your obsession? Or someone else's orders?" Tom's calm demeanor faltered. A bead of sweat ran down his temple. He opened his mouth to speak, then shut it. Karen's eyes narrowed, scanning the crowd, realizing perhaps this wasn't private anymore. I moved, subtly, toward the main lawn where the live band was playing. I projected my voice just enough to be heard by those close. "I think it's time everyone saw what's really happening." Karen froze. Her hands twitched. The first domino of the confrontation had fallen. I pulled the photos from the envelope and, with quick precision, taped them to the board of the portable fence I'd brought as a demonstration, proof of her surveillance. The neighbor's chatter faltered, curiosity piqued. Karen's face paled. "You've gone too far," she hissed, stepping forward. "This isn't just about a fence." I nodded. "Exactly. And now everyone can see the truth. Everyone can judge for themselves." A hush fell. The crowd, sensing tension, began to circle closer. Cameras lifted. Phones recorded. I had set the stage perfectly, public and undeniable. Then Tom snapped. He grabbed Karen's arm, pulling her back. "Stop. This isn't the time." His voice was sharp, panicked. But Karen wrenched free, eyes blazing, rage unmasked. You think you can control me," she screamed, pointing at me. "All of you. You don't understand." And that was the spark. She lunged toward the fence demonstration, knocking photos to the ground. The crowd gasped. I reacted instantly, moving to intercept, but it was too late. One of the photos fluttered to the grass, and as it landed, the object beneath it shifted, a small camera Karen had hidden, still recording, blinking red. She'd been capturing the confrontation, planning her own narrative. I grabbed it before she could react, holding it up. "Gotcha. All of it." Her face twisted, fury and disbelief mingling. The calm, measured Karen was gone. In her place was raw, unfiltered obsession. And then, the twist. She reached into her bag, producing a set of keys. My eyes widened, they matched the initials on the key I had found days ago, KT. Tom gasped. "Karen, no." But the moment was lost. She raised the key like a trophy. "This isn't over. You think showing photos makes you safe? You think this ends here?" I kept my stance steady, voice calm, even as adrenaline surged. "You lost control the moment you threatened everyone's safety. And now, everyone knows." The crowd murmured, recording, whispering. The veil of suburban normalcy shattered. Karen's empire of fear was exposed. But even in defeat, her eyes held a final, chilling promise. She turned abruptly and stormed toward her house, the crowd parting instinctively. Tom followed, silent, conflicted, leaving me standing in the center of the cul-de-sac. I exhaled slowly, heart hammering. The showdown was over, the threat publicly revealed, but the key in my hand, a symbol, a message, reminded me this wasn't the end. The neighborhood watched. Some clapped awkwardly, unsure of what had happened. Others whispered, eyes wide, cameras still recording. And I realized, the battle had shifted from the shadows to the open, but the war wasn't finished. Karen had unraveled, Tom had wavered, and the community had witnessed the drama. Yet that key, that single, small object, suggested a deeper, more dangerous game. One that Karen had been playing all along, and perhaps one she had only just begun. I stared at the fence, the photos, the key in my hand, and understood, the confrontation was public, explosive, and final for now, but the enemy, real or hidden, was still out there, waiting for the next move. The morning after the block party was eerily quiet. The sun peeked weakly through gray clouds, casting a pallid light over the cul-de-sac. The festive decorations still hung limp on telephone poles and fences, a reminder of last night's drama. I stepped outside, coffee in hand, and surveyed the aftermath. The portable fence with the displayed photos had been knocked over during Karen's outburst. Some neighbors had already picked up the scattered papers, whispering among themselves. Others stared, lingering at the edges, reluctant to enter the tension that still lingered like a thick fog. I saw Tom across the street, talking quietly to another neighbor. He looked older, weary, the weight of guilt or fear, or both etched into his face. He caught my eye and nodded slightly, an unspoken acknowledgement of last night's events. I walked over, keeping my pace casual. "Tom," I said. "Everything okay?" He exhaled slowly. "For now. Karen's contained. The HOA's involved. People know the truth." He hesitated, glancing at the direction of his house. "She's furious, but she can't act without everyone watching now. At least, not as easily." I nodded, understanding the fragility of the situation. Karen's obsession was dangerous, but exposure had shifted the power. She couldn't move without scrutiny. And yet, there was a tension in Tom's eyes that told me containment was temporary. Over the next few days, the neighborhood began to normalize, cautiously. Lawn mowers hummed, sprinklers spurted water, and children played in the cul-de-sac again. But I noticed subtle signs that not everything was settled. A gate left slightly ajar. A hedgerow trimmed unevenly. Small, almost imperceptible changes, like Karen's invisible fingerprints on reality. I kept my camera and notebooks nearby, documenting everything. It was the only way to feel secure, even if the threat seemed dormant. Tom stopped by one afternoon, this time without Karen. He carried a small envelope, similar to the one she'd dropped at the block party, but this one bore a different tone. "For you," he said, voice low, careful. I took it and opened it slowly. Inside, a handwritten note, neat, deliberate. "You did well. But be careful. She's patient, persistent, and clever. This is only the beginning." I looked up. Tom's expression was difficult to read, concern, fear, perhaps regret. He left without another word, disappearing into the house next door, leaving me with the note, my coffee, and a sense of unresolved tension. Even as the neighborhood regained a semblance of peace, I realized the emotional fallout was deeper than anyone could see. Neighbors exchanged cautious smiles, children laughed with wary freedom, and the air carried a lingering unease. Everyone had witnessed the drama, yet few understood its gravity. I visited my fence, now repaired and straightened, the warped board replaced with fresh timber. It stood sturdy, unyielding, my silent testament that boundaries could be defended. But the key I had found, the ornate one with KT engraved, sat in my pocket, heavy and foreboding. It was a reminder that threats lingered, even in the mundane safety of suburban life. That night, I walked the perimeter again, flashlight in hand, scanning shadows, hedgerows, and the spaces between trees. Nothing moved, nothing breathed, yet the feeling persisted. Someone or something was watching. I couldn't see it, but instinct told me it was there. The same invisible hand that had orchestrated the last few weeks hadn't vanished. I returned to my home, locked doors, and set the cameras. The neighborhood was quiet, too quiet, and the darkness outside seemed to thrum with silent intent. I lay in bed, mind racing, thinking about Karen, Tom, the envelope, and the key. Sleep came reluctantly, punctuated by the distant hum of sprinklers, passing cars, and the occasional bark from a neighbor's dog. Shadows on the walls seemed to twist and shift as if alive. And in the corner of my mind, a small voice whispered, "It's not over." Days turned into weeks. Karen avoided direct confrontation, but I noticed patterns, glances through windows, cars parked idly across the street, subtle movements when no one else was around. The key remained on my desk, a constant, silent warning that the danger was patient and persistent. One evening, as I reviewed photos from the block party for the umpteenth time, I noticed something I hadn't seen before: a shadow in the background, partially obscured, watching the confrontation unfold. Not Karen, not Tom. Someone else entirely. Someone unseen until now. The revelation hit me with a cold certainty. Karen had been the front, a mask for a more calculated force operating in the background. Her obsession was the visible threat, but the real danger, the one orchestrating events from the shadows, was still out there, waiting for the next move. I looked around my quiet home, at the familiar suburban street bathed in streetlight, and understood the fragile balance of safety and danger. The battle I had fought was temporary, a skirmish one, but the war, silent, patient, and cold, was far from over. I placed the key carefully in a drawer, resolving to watch, document, and wait. And as I turned off the lights, the faintest whisper of movement caught my attention. Just beyond the window, a fleeting shadow vanished into the night. A shiver ran down my spine. Karen had been the storm, but the real threat was the eye waiting beyond her reach. And I knew, with an unsettling clarity, that when it moved again, it would be precise, deliberate, and unstoppable. The cul-de-sac slept peacefully, unaware of the silent predator lurking just beyond the borders of their homes. I closed my eyes, heart still racing, mind alert. One truth was clear: the immediate danger had passed, the emotional fallout was settling, but the story, our story, was far from finished. And somewhere in the shadows, the next move was already being planned.